Hi everyone, we're the Physio Matters First Steps team and we're back today for our second video. We're going to be covering the topic of applying for your first job. We know that it can be quite a daunting experience if you've never had to apply for a physio job before. So we're hoping we can share some of our tips, our own experiences, and break down the process a little bit so that you guys are kind of as prepared as you can be. We're going to introduce ourselves quickly and then we'll get straight into things. So my name is Chloe. I've just graduated from Cardiff Uni and I'm about to start as a Band 5 physio there.
My name is Amelia. I'm currently going into my final year as a physio student at Salford Uni and I should soon be starting to apply for jobs.
I'm Farouk Bello. I am, a rotational physio as well. I'm currently working in community and just had to wedge this in there. Check out I am the creator of Rook's Health and Rook's Health podcast. Just had to wedge that in there.
Hi, I'm Carol and I'm a Band 5 rotational physio working in the south of England and I've been qualified a year.
And hi, my name is Lewis. I'm a physiotherapist. I work in an MSK and pain management service and started in April of this year.
Awesome. So someone who's thinking about applying for jobs and things like that, when should I start? You know, and how do I find the jobs? How do I even know what's out there?
So I think a lot of the time, if you're on placement, you'd kind of have an idea of where you want to apply for jobs. If you're in a part of the country and you particularly enjoy it with university, then you're always going to want to try and get your foot in the door with certain placements. And I think often hospitals, if they've had a really positive experience of a student on placement, they're very keen to try and keep hold of them. I don't know what other people had any experience of that on placement.
Yeah, I made sure as well on if it's like an NHS job that you're after. I know a lot of new graduates kind of like go into the NHS first and then sort of figure out from there where they want to take their career. But I made sure kind of at the start of third year to sign up to NHS jobs, and on there you can kind of tick any of the areas that you're interested in and sort of set it so that you only see like Band 5 jobs, and then you get an email when new ones come out, so it means that you're kind of in the loop. You're not worried about missing jobs or anything, so that can be a good way to kind of keep on top of that and find jobs.
One thing I found useful when looking for jobs was also to narrow it down to what I needed. So did I want a community job? Did I want a static job? Did I want a rotational job? Did I want an acute job? Was there specific locations in the country? Was there a certain, some new grads are mature students and don't have the flexibility of maybe some of the younger sort of more people who have just come through uni of being able to go wherever they fancy in the country. You've got a reason to be tied somewhere. So thinking of those then helps you also narrow down where you are going to look for jobs, or how easily you can kind of rule out the ones you don't even want to bother looking at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just in terms of social media, this is where LinkedIn comes quite in handy. I don't really use it too often, but I think for job advertisements, it's quite good. Sometimes something will pop up on there that you wouldn't see on Indeed or other websites, for instance. And also then you've got a direct link to the person who's kind of advertising the job, whether that be through recruitment or whatever. So it's kind of a step ahead of the game in that respect. But there's loads of different websites you can use, and I agree with Carol, it's narrowing them down effectively, because it can be quite a task when it all comes up and it's like, oh, where do I start?
I would say as well, if you have any questions about a job, so if you're not sure if it will work for you or if you want to find out what rotations they offer, don't be afraid to give them a call up. A lot of them have a number at the bottom, so you can just phone and just say, I've just got a few questions about the job before you even apply. And actually, I think sometimes if you get your name in there before you submit an application, someone's already seen that you're interested and that you're not just applying just as a one-off, that's actually a job that you want. So don't be afraid to kind of ask your local trust or whatever trust that you're wanting to apply to, and sort of get your name out there a bit before jobs come out.
I think the other thing is, remember from your placements that you've you've worked with teams or worked in places where you know what style works for you. So actually having those conversations down the phone with someone, you kind of start to get a feel of actually, is that somewhere you want to be?
Yeah, I think it boils down to back to like when you first applied for like A level, when you were first looking for physiotherapy jobs, you'd spend a day or two at a hospital, wouldn't you? Literally just being someone's shadow. But effectively, although it was you are being someone's shadow for 2 days, you've got your foot in the door, they know your name, they can put a face to the name, etc. So it's just getting through that process, and then it's quite easy then to build some other bridges. So yeah, I agree.
Farouk, anything to add before I think of the next question?
Yeah, I was about to say, what was the original question? Because it was what's the right time, right?
How do you find jobs in the
How do you
first
find it?
place,
Yeah.
and when to
So
start looking?
Putting
yeah,
the feelers out.
yeah, exactly. I think as early as possible is one of the easier answers, because especially when you're crossing that bridge from second year to third year. Third year is the prime time you really want to start looking at where do you want to work. And as Lewis and them said, it's like when you start working on placements, on different placements, you realize that these different people already, they have job vacancies available that they're coming up soon. So you really want to get yourself in the door already. And one big one is sometimes they don't have the job available at the time, but it doesn't matter if you still put yourself forward and say, you know what, if this job comes available, because sometimes the time of uni, maybe January, they're not opening what's it called, applications yet, but in a few months they will. So it's just keeping on top of that, and also figuring out where do you want to work. I think Carol said very well. It's like sometimes I myself, I was very flexible. I could move anywhere. You could have sent me anywhere to work, and I was applying jobs. I applied to jobs all the way from Wales to, I think, York, because I was ready to move anywhere. And when you have that level of flexibility, you can really apply anywhere. But if you don't, it just having to, is knowing, and early recognition is knowing where you want to go early enough. And once you figure that out, it makes it a lot easier. So you're not getting towards the end of your degree, and then you're now thinking, oh crap, where do I really want to work?
Yeah,
And you're now
panic.
scrambling left. Exactly, panic mode. So knowing early enough and starting as early as possible, really and truly.
So so you found the job you want, you want to apply. What sort of preparation should you do for the application process or the interview? What sort of key steps would you recommend?
So my first thing would be read the job spec. I know it sounds really obvious, but read the job spec, like download it and go through it. Quite often, most jobs, particularly if it's an NHS job, will have an essential criteria and like a desirable like criteria. Make sure you actually feel like you can fulfill the essential criteria, because if you can't, then you probably need to figure out what you're going to do. And it doesn't matter that, like, you might be like, oh, I can't quite feel that yet if you're, let's say, applying halfway through third year, but I will be by the end. That's okay. I remember being like, oh, the essential job criteria is HCPC reg. Well, you can't get that, so you qualify.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm thinking. I'm like, well, I have barely done any experience yet, but I need to start applying for jobs.
Yeah, like you will get that, and you're going to get that, providing you qualify. So, and you haven't done anything ridiculous. So, don't panic, but look down it realistically and think, oh, if I was asked, do I feel like I could say or write something down that I feel would fulfill those, and kind of use it like a checklist.
I definitely agree with a checklist. Like when you go to write, so normally, like if you're applying for an NHS job, I've only applied for NHS one, so that's kind of what I'm speaking from, but you have to submit like a personal kind of statement thing, sort of about 500 words or so, sort of saying why they should select you for interview. And 500 words sounds a lot, but it really disappears quickly. But I would say literally when you're writing that, get the person specification up and like go through what the essential criteria is and literally just spell it out to them that you've got it. So like if it says you need to be a team player, find an example of when you've done something, you've had to work in a team, say that, and then like they can literally go through it, tick those off, and they'll be like, right, we'll interview them. And like for me, I felt like that was something I didn't know. So that was one of the reasons that I didn't get a job, was because I hadn't really used the person specification. So yeah, definitely kind of like use that as almost like your like Bible for what am I going to put in this kind of like application. And same going into the interview. If you get through to interview, make sure that you've got examples of like all the skills that they want. So if they ask you about it, you're kind of like ready to go.
I think Chloe said it well. Was one thing I haven't realized personally was that I think I've also asking band sixes and band sevens is it's kind of when they're judging and when they're looking at your application, they have to be as objective as possible to an extent. So they have when they put all those keywords and all those key responsibilities they want each person to be able to fulfill, they're putting it for a reason so that when you're reading through your personal statement or your application, they can actually see that you've actually hit those on the nail. And even though you may be the best student or you may have all the experience and everything you really need and you think you're more than qualified for the job, if you don't actually put those in there, it'll be very difficult for them to look at you objectively because because applications get multiple people, so they have to kind of weed it out, and then you're maybe putting characteristics of something else that's not actually what they're looking for, although it might be great as a physio in whole, but it's not what they're looking for specifically. So as I said, trying to make sure that your personal statement has everything, and they put it there for a reason. I've learned the hard way. Sometimes I got applications where they were just, and when you ask for feedback, even when you get rejections, I'm sure that'll be another question. When you get rejection, you ask for feedback. I got one and it was just like, the application was great. That's because I was a bit lazy. I'll be honest. I kind of used the same personal statement for like 2 different places. And one of them I got in and the other one I didn't because I was using the same one, which you really don't want to do. Sometimes you might get it, but it's not good advice. I'm not going to give you to try and make it very personalized to the specific trust you're applying to. And that's, as long as you hit everything on the nail, that's one of the easiest ways to actually make sure your application is bulletproof.
In regards to specific trust as well, I think with any job, just having a real good, going into a bit of research around it. So bar physio, just trying to nail down some of like the history and like the geographical locations and things is really important. And having an idea of kind of where you're potentially going to be living, what your commuting time's going to be, just so it gives an idea to them that you've kind of considered all of that. And it's not like a last minute decision in terms of, oh, this is a job opportunity, I want to go for it. You're making them aware that it's something that you've really considered. It just kind of out the box thinking. They may not cover it, they may not ask you it, but I mean, it's just something to consider just in case.
I know
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, worth having a look. Like if they're doing any research projects, do you know what? Anything like have a quick Google on the news about that trust, because it might be that there's something that's up and coming that you really like the idea of, and if you can slip that in either your personal statement or your interview, then it's like they know that you're passionate about working there. Like you've almost got to sell them to them as well.
Yeah, exactly. If they're also like say a major trauma unit as the sirens pass by,
not in trouble.
Yeah, it's just a good thing to put in. So like for instance, where I live in Lincolnshire, Lincoln Hospital is not a major trauma unit. The nearest ones are Nottingham and Hull. So whenever you see like an ambicopter fly over, you straight away think, okay, that's going to Nottingham, that's going to Hull. But just putting that in to say, oh, I'd really like having the opportunity to work on neurosurgery with like all different types of RTA type things coming in, things you wouldn't see in other hospitals, for instance. I suppose creates a bit more insight in terms of what you could experience as well, and it's good that you've kind of reflected upon that in terms of what they can offer in terms of rotations as well.
I think also on that like thing of thinking about the wider picture, don't forget that they do want you to have a life outside of physio, like says us all doing physio podcast
on a Friday.
But like I remember one of my questions being like, what's your work-life balance? Like it is okay to have a hobby, whether that be, you know, those people who follow Chloe on Twitter will know she's running. She's always running.
I didn't know that. Was not aware of that one.
Running.
Thanks, guys.
You know, like we've all got hobbies, we've got things we do, and actually that's just as important to them, is to know that they're not going to employ someone that's just going to burn out on them.
Really important, yeah.
And you can use that as your personal statement. Like not all your personal statement or all your examples you give to someone in your interview have to be very like physio or therapy based. It's okay to be like, an example of teamwork is when I, you know, I don't know, played in a sports team or played in a music band or something, and just tweak, rather than rewriting your whole personal statement for each job, tweak it. So have like the bare bones of the examples that you think fit most jobs, and then tweak it, like Farouk was saying, for the trust, rather than being like, I've got to rewrite a whole 500 words.
I was just wondering if you thought there was any difference in preparing for jobs in the NHS and preparing for jobs outside of the NHS.
Can I start answering this question?
Right.
So from personal experience, yes, with the NHS, it's obviously an umbrella, whereas if there's an organisation, there's more to the history. So having an idea of kind of how the organisation started, how it's been built up from there, and kind of their vision moving forward. I know that's more of a company and business orientated goal, but at the end of the day, it is being run as a business. So that's really important for the people that are pushing that forward. So yeah, having an idea of that. And I think as well, it's important how then, even though it is an organisation, how all the other things in that community and the geographical area links into those resources and services, because it can get quite messy in terms of, well, we're running this and then this other service is running this. So gathering an idea in terms of you understand what there is in that area, it just makes it a lot easier, not only for when you start, obviously, but for the employer, because they think, their head's screwed on. They already know that it's not that simple in terms of direction and signposting. So yeah, having a good background knowledge of that's important.
I think the only difference I would say in terms of the NHS to that is that, like, you're not going to be expected to know necessarily the other services, because quite often in the NHS, if you've not used it, then you just don't know it exists. And it's a bit harder to kind of find necessarily, because you might have to be qualified to refer to it or whatever. But I think a case of having an idea of the global idea of what's going on. So I remember when I was applying for jobs, like the next NHS 5-year plan had come out. So actually just knowing that had come out, and I didn't read it page to page, not going to lie, but knowing the kind of big parts of it and understanding that in theory your trust will be going with that in some way, or is there, like a big document that's come out, and actually does that apply to your trust? And if it does, just being aware of it.
Do you think there'll be change with COVID and things like that? Would that be something that you need to like check up on before you apply and stuff?
Farouk might back me up on this, but like so I was applying for jobs kind of in like April, May, and a lot of the trusts were just releasing their kind of like COVID-19 rehab plans and kind of like what their targets were for kind of coming back out of lockdown and kind of like, recovering from that first wave. So I made sure to kind of have a read of those, and that was more, I didn't put that in the personal statement. The personal statement, I think, is very much you just go through the person spec a little, because you haven't got that many words. But actually, once I had the interview, I'd say you're prepped for that. You want to look a little bit more around, like Carol said, the guidelines that are there. I don't think anyone's mentioned yet as well. So like in an interview, you'll have some questions that will be on your kind of like skills, like communication, teamwork, skills like that. And then there'll also be questions that are on your kind of knowledge. So they tend to have ones on like MSK, neuro, and respiratory. And I think it's remembering for that they're coming at this as you as a new band 5. So you don't need to know everything. Like, you don't need to know your ABGs off by heart. You don't need to know all of the, special tests for MSK, but they want to see in those that you're safe and that kind of, your red flags, that you would take, if you weren't sure on something, you would go to your supervisor, or you would check the NICE guidelines, or that you kind of know your limits. And that was something that I didn't really realise until kind of into my like second or third interview. They don't want perfection. They just want someone who's going to be safe and kind of willing to learn, really. So that would probably be a big tip.
And yeah, Chloe's definitely right. We applied at a very, very interesting time where normally a lot of the interviews would have been face-to-face, but due to it, I think only had maybe 1 or 2 face-to-face, and everything else was online. So just knowing what the situation is between COVID and how that actually plays a role. But looking at it from another perspective, that there are multiple other jobs as private company jobs. At the end of the day, what you're expected to be is a physiotherapist. So there are basic things you, in a sense, have to have to be in this profession, which you probably already would if you've gotten to the point where you're applying for jobs, looking for jobs. But there's a slight difference between things like NHS for a sports job, which like we can go into a whole different thing about sports physio jobs and the whole sporting industry. But then also like private NHS, as a private NHS, private hospitals and private physio practices, they all kind of have a, in a sense, the basics and the foundations, but they all have a different things. I think Lewis said it well, that those type of places, they'll have a bit more history, and they probably want you to know a bit more about the history and just the background of that thing. For example, maybe if you're going into a sports club, they would expect more of your, maybe, I don't know, previous experience, or you to be talking more in interviews or even in a personal statement if they ask you for one about things that are related. It wouldn't make too much sense, if this makes sense, if you're applying for a, I don't know, sports MSK physiotherapist at a football club, and then you're really highlighting significantly about what's it called, neuro, like specialty and things like that. It would be more geared towards the actual job role you're applying for. And I think that would apply anywhere. If you're going to apply for like a respiratory physiotherapist role, you wouldn't go to the interview and start talking all about MSK and then leave out respiratory, because it would be like you're not really answering the question. So it's knowing this specific area, and they all vary, but they all have the basic framework of you're a physiotherapist, and there are things you should know, the basic groundworks.
I think as well, although we are in like a really crazy time at the moment, just the aspect of everyone working from home has created like a whole new level to communication skills, and especially for people on virtual placements, it's really tricky because you're not seeing people face to face, you're not seeing your supervisor every day and building that relationship. It's via email and via whatever else communication devices. So I think I was having a chat with someone about this the other day, and I think it's just something you can really kind of milk on your CV. Like, just say, obviously you've had to adapt to a load of different virtual environments, and kind of you've been speaking to loads of new people, and it just looks good, and it's different as well, and then it fits in nicely with the whole chat around which you're going to get in the interview about COVID and kind of how rehab's going to be affected, and in terms of MSK, for example, moving forward, some other bits and bobs, and it will just tie in nicely. So don't see it as a downside if if things have been cut off, or you've had virtual placements which have been replaced. Utilize it and make the most of it on your application form.
So I've done the application, I've been successful, I've actually managed to get an interview. How do I not panic on the day? Like, what are your tips for the day of?
So
Drink.
I'm definitely not a good person to ask for this. I'm very much a panicker. So
my first thing is, like, there are loads and loads of like Facebook media, like Facebook groups, social media groups that will have had like scenario questions or possible questions that can be out there. Like, if you've got an interview, they're not going to be like, it's tomorrow. Go and read some.
I did get one like 4 days later. So
yeah, but give yourself a bit of a heads up. And then I would say be prepared for a question that's about you, a question that's about why you want to work there, a scenario question. So, a classic one is a patient's fallen over in a hospital corridor. What do you do? Like, be prepared for a scenario question, and then, be prepared for as few possible, areas that you might work in. So if you're rotational, it's probably going to be some sort of MSK orthopedic question, some sort of neuro question, some sort of respiratory question. But like, have an idea that those are the things they're probably going to sort of want to investigate. And then just try and remember, they want to interview you. It's as much about you selling yourself to them as it is them telling you why, if they offer you the job, you want to accept it.
Yeah, I think that's very, very accurate, in the sense that, with interviews, it's very natural that, and people are very, very, very significantly, some people are very natural at things like interviews and some people aren't. So it's gauging where you actually are on a personal level and saying, do you feel like you're one of those people who need a lot more, not in a sense, a lot more preparation and things like that? I'll be honest, I'm probably may not be the best person to give it, because I'm one of those less, not less prepared, but less, I don't find interviews so harsh. But once you do a few, because I did during my like whole month, I think I did like 10 course. So I was just doing a lot, and that's because myself, I kept sending applications out, and I kind of getting back, and I just had to do so many. But after the first one was a bit tense, and I was like, because it's a new environment, it's natural. But then by the time you realize it's actually not bad, these are all the physios, and they are compassionate, and they understand. They've been where you are, so they don't want to make you feel uncomfortable or put a lot of pressure on you, because that'll just be mean. And I don't think decent human beings would do that. And physio tends to be a compassionate course, so you were lucky on that front. But it's also recognizing that as you get better, as you get more interviews, you will get better. And one actually cheeky way you can actually get around this is ask someone who's probably had an interview in the trust before. Maybe you know someone. That's where networking comes into play, and just asking someone who's already there, like, what type of questions can we expect? Because trust is very different. Trust vary a bit differently. And as Kara said, there's a basic, fundamentals. They will ask some clinical questions. They will ask things like management questions, some ethical questions, like if this was to happen, or an altercation should happen on the ward, how would you deal with it? Things like that. So it's not all just clinical and asking you about your knowledge, because some people are great at knowledge, but just because you're great at knowledge doesn't make you the best team player or something like that. So it's little different questions from different areas. I think we will probably do a whole infographic on the areas you might need to focus on later on. But just being prepared for the multiple facets of being a physiotherapist and being a team player on a ward, community, or pretty much anywhere. But you will get naturally, as soon as you do one, it gets a lot easier.
Yeah, create a bit of a folder as well for yourself. So just be proactive and look busy. So if you're walking with like a folder with documents printed off, it looks like you've just done your homework, I suppose. And also maybe bringing in some bits from like your course. So if you've done any poster presentations or presentations, whatever really, print them off. So if topic comes up, you can be like, yeah, I did this, and you can expand upon it, especially if you've got early interest in something and it pops up in the conversation. It's good to expand upon. You mentioned about unsuccessful applications there. I was just about to say something. I can't remember what I was going to say. But
Can I just jump in? Sorry, when you said about portfolio, because I had one face-to-face, and then the rest of mine were Zoom. It was kind of split over like lockdown. So actually, when I had the Zoom interview, I sort of when I got the interview, I like replied and was like, oh yeah, like I accept that time, and attached my portfolio to it, and was like, obviously I can't bring this in person to chat about, but here is my portfolio in case you're interested. I don't know if they ever looked at it, but it shows that like you're proactive, so they, that's already a tick in their box that you're kind of independent at managing your CPD and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a whole
smile.
topic of conversation, like keeping a log of what you've been doing. And if you're using a portfolio throughout final year, such as Pebble Pad, or is the other one Mahara? I think that's the one I used in MSc. Keeping a tab of everything on your placements, and then, like you say, they might want to look at it, they might not, but for your own reflections, it's good anyway. So I think that's important.
Cheeky plug for our CSP video. CPD video.
CPD.
Our CPD video is useful. But also, like we said in that video, your portfolio doesn't have to be perfect. I know I went into my interview being like, oh my God, it's not like uniform, it's not like neat, it's not perfect.
It's yours.
They really don't.
I got a job. They didn't care. They flipped through it. They knew what I'd done. They didn't like sit there and interrogate it.
Yeah, no, as long as you can refer back to it and understand what's on it, then I suppose that's the most important thing.
Just lastly, don't forget to smile. Like, you can be so caught up in your nerves and everything, but like they're looking for someone that's going to fit in the team. So, if you're going in there friendly, smiley, like, kind of confident but not over cocky, then that's instantly going to make them have a bit more of like that kind of relationship with you and think, yeah, that's what we want on the team. And I tried to, in my head, treat it more like a chat rather than an interview, which it ended up being. They ask you questions, you answer, and then like don't be afraid also to ask them questions back, and like don't be afraid if they ask you a question to take a second, because I had the habit of sometimes they'd say a question and I'd waffle into an answer and halfway through be like, I have no idea where I'm going with this, like, or what point I'm trying to make. So like, don't be afraid to kind of take a second, think about an answer. or ask them if you're like, oh my god, I've got nothing. Oh, can you repeat that question for me, please? While your brain kind of like kicks in. So yeah, they're not looking for you to have these answers like off the top of your head. Like, we're not robots. So
I have a vivid memory of sitting in my successful interview, like checklisting my respiratory checklist off my fingers.
Yeah.
So
We've just going what Chloe said about asking them questions. I think that's really important, because they're there to interview you, but at the same time you're going to be working with them, so you kind of want to know what they like
getting
and what
into, yeah.
I remember in my physio interview, I asked the guy that was interviewing me kind of what he got up to, and then it just led like a whole down a different avenue, non-physio related, in terms of what he enjoyed. And it was like, some weird sport that he like refereed abroad, but like it created like an easy conversation between us. And then I felt much more comfortable to speak to him about physio stuff after that, and I felt really happy coming out of that interview. So yeah, it's just from a personal level, isn't it? Everybody's human. Everybody does things, like Carol said at the beginning, outside of physio. So yeah, have a chat about that. I remember what I was going to say when Farouk mentioned about by the way, it was really annoying me. Really important point. If you are unsuccessful, and we'll probably move on to this point after I've mentioned this,
We will.
get feedback. Ask them kind of what was the go with it. Why wasn't I successful? What could I do next time to improve? And just gather it, and don't use it as a negative. Take the positives and reflect upon it. And there's going to be plenty more opportunities. There's loads of jobs out there. Yeah. So I suppose that'll open up for everyone else to chip in from there.
Yeah, building on that, how do you handle those unsuccessful applications? Keep that momentum going, as Lewis is saying, utilize that feedback and things like that.
I think it's quite like life, you're not going to win every single time, but it's what you take from it. Lewis already said it perfectly. It's you recognizing that, you are, if you apply for, I don't know, 15, you are going to get rejections for some, unless you are a perfect human being. And I'm yet to see a perfect human being who will never have any failures. But
It'd be a bit
you
scary.
yeah, we will be scary, exactly. But it's a very natural process. But it's also recognizing that even if you fail, because there are multiple reasons why they could you may be unsuccessful, and one of those reasons might be someone else was just a little bit better than you. Because as I said before, they use objective markers, so they have to use, they have to tick certain boxes, and at the end of the day, I think some places they'll give you a score out of, you may have gotten 90 or 98, but someone else got 99. It doesn't mean you're bad or you had a bad interview. It just means someone was a little bit better, and that's literally how life is. I think it was one where I had one personally, and the feedback was, what, we know you did very well, it's just someone else did better. So we're going to put you on a list. That's very common, actually. They'll do this thing where they'll put you on a waiting list, quote unquote, or in case something happens, maybe because people do tend to drop out. Sometimes someone will just be like, due to life, I can't do it anymore, and then you're next up. So you might just take it as, what, if you get that feedback and they say, what, you did very well, you really need to take that as reinforcement and say, what, I can take that same interview or that same alter, put it into the next one. Because sometimes they don't actually have, or interviews, they don't have a critique for you, like, oh, you could have done this better. They're like, you did everything well, someone just did it a little bit better than you. And you have those type of things are very good things. And on the other end, if they give you feedback, take it up and go use it for the next one, and you will eventually land on your feet very easily.
Definitely. I think sometimes it's almost like potluck as well, like in terms of who interviews you. Like, some people you're going to naturally make that connection straight away, and it's going to be great, and you'll see them and be like, okay, buzzing, can't wait. And some people you might think, okay, just the kind of the vibe you get. Difficult, because that's out of your hands and you've got to do the best in that situation. But yeah, if I was in that position, I'd just think, you know what, maybe this wasn't right for me. If I'm going to be working with someone who, yes, I find it difficult to interview, and I'm not actually going to maybe be able to feel I can connect with them properly when I'm working, maybe that was kind of a good thing, and it was kind of written in the stars, I suppose, that it wasn't the right job for you at that time. Quite deep, but I think it's a good way to look at it.
I think
Yeah,
also
everything just. Oh, you go.
No. I was gonna say, setting yourself like expectations. I know when I applied for my first job, it was like, I'm sending off my personal statement, I want feedback on that. And actually, if I get offered an interview, then that's just I'm like one step closer, rather than being like, oh, I'm applying for my first job, I'm gonna get it. I found that really helpful for myself, because I know that if I look too far into the distance or like put my goal too far away, then I would just criticize myself. So having like that as my goal, being like, okay, I want to work on my personal statement and get that nailed, and doing it that way.
Yep.
Chloe?
Yeah, I think as physios, we are like naturally very good at reflecting. Like we're very reflective people. We like to kind of learn on things. So yeah, like you say, if you get that rejection, kind of I tried to spin it as, okay, this isn't that I'm not good enough. It's just that I perhaps didn't sell myself in the way that was kind of like what they wanted or the most effective way. And yeah, like make sure that you reflect on that, learn from it, and then use it to build for next time. Definitely does not make you a bad physio. There's a lot of kind of people out there that are like tops of their career now that had rejections as a band 5. It's just that kind of getting your foot in the door, getting that experience, and then you're kind of like on a roll then. So but yeah, try and enjoy it as well. Like it's exciting when you finally, you know, you work hard, you put the effort in to do your statement, do your interview, you might have some rejections, and then you finally get that call that's like, yeah, we want to offer you the job. Like I sobbed like a child. So yeah, just enjoy it. Like the first time you're going to get your first physio job, you know, that you're not going to do that again. So yeah, make sure that you enjoy it and celebrate a bit before the hard work starts.
That's it.
Ultimately, like, remember why you wanted to be a physio or a therapist, because that's the reason you're applying for the job. Like, that's the reason you've gone into this in the first place, and try and keep that as your, I think, like, focus and reason for doing it. And it's okay also to take a break. Like, I remember in third year being really stressed over like my dissertation and actually taking a step back from applications. It's okay to like give yourself a bit of headspace. Don't feel like you've got to constantly be on it. I think that would be my thing. Like, you're not perfect. You can't run at 100 miles an hour. It's okay to do whatever works for you.
Yeah. And don't get caught up with everyone else in the class who's applying for jobs and they've had this interview, that interview. You go at your own pace, you do you at the end of the day. It may be that they've got a connection, their parents work in the hospital, which has just accelerated the process. It doesn't matter. Don't compare yourself to others. Like, you apply for jobs, you go at your own pace, because that was a bit of a problem I found on my course, that everyone was like, oh, so-and-so's got this interview, so-and-so's got that interview. And it's like, yeah, that's great. I'm really happy for them, but it's not me. And that's their business. Like, don't get caught up with everyone else. You just do you at the end of the day.
First steps getting deep on a Friday night for you all.
I found all those tips really helpful, guys. I don't know if Farouk, you want to do some sort of sum up of the things that we've all talked about.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, when it comes to interviews, applying for jobs, it's a whole process in the sense that there are steps you have to go through. And as you will find out this by yourself. Sometimes you have to learn some things through experience. Sometimes you have to learn through multiple failures. But at the end of the day, the job market it tends to be a good perspectives for physiotherapists. I'm sure you've heard this on your course. Of people have heard, everyone here has heard this. They'll give you a rate like 98% of us get jobs within 6 months. So it tends to be good. It's just knowing where to look, how to look, and being ready when you actually start getting into this process, because it can be a long process. And depending on where you are from, depending on where I had a whole long process being what's it called, international. It's a whole different thing for different places, but it's just recognizing all of these things. And I think, as everyone has said, you just have to be ready for it. And when you're in it, you're in it, and the whole process goes by smoothly. And by the time you get the job, you forget about everything. Honestly, I didn't remember most of these things until you started asking me this, because I've already started a job. And then you remember, it's like flashbacks. But once you remember all these things, the failures, the this and that, all this rejections, they all go away because you've already moved past that. And thank you for listening to the 5 of us talk. We can be a mouthful, but hopefully you did find some of the information we gave very relevant. And while you're here, make sure to check out Physio Matters and First Steps on Twitter. We'll put our Twitter somewhere on this video or at the end, and we'll put our Instagram. Make sure we post regularly. We post a lot of videos. We post a lot of infographics on Instagram particularly, and our Twitter. is very active, and we work with the Physio Matters team. So make sure to check us out on both Instagram and Twitter, and stay tuned for more of our content.